The Forgotten Edge. The galaxy was old, older than any chart could truly explain. For centuries, the great civilizations drew lines, borders, and paths across the stars. Their maps were wide and precise, showing trade routes, war fronts, and forgotten ruins. But all of them agreed on one thing. Beyond a certain region, the map stopped. The edge of the galactic map was not a natural barrier. It was not a wall of dark matter nor a storm of gravity. It was simply empty space, so vast that even the most advanced species declared it pointless to go further. They had enough worlds, enough resources, enough power. They said nothing of importance lay beyond. But then humans came. At first, humans were a small species from a single blue planet. They were late arrivals to the galactic community, far behind the ancient powers. Their ships were clumsy compared to the sleek crafts of the old empires. Their colonies were fragile against the storms of deep space. And yet, there was something unusual about them. Something that made the old powers pause. Humans never stopped. Where others built safe circles of comfort, humans walked past them. Where maps ended, they asked, what lies further? Even when warned of danger, they stepped into the dark. It began with explorers, small crews who left the well-known routes and sailed into unmarked space. Their names were simple, their ships often second-hand, but their will was sharper than steel. They faced failures, lost expeditions, broken engines, silence in the void. Yet for every ship that vanished, 2 more left the docks. At the galactic edge, the other species watched with amusement first, then with disbelief. No one had ever gone that far and returned. But humans did. Not only did they returned with stories of strange stars, hidden systems, and signs of forgotten life that even the ancients had missed. In the grand halls of the great powers, some dismissed it as reckless foolishness. They are children, one elder species said. They play with shadows. Yet others whispered differently. Children they may be, a quiet voice replied, but even children grow. And children carry fire. The edge began to change. What was once an empty silence now glowed with the light of human ships. Stations appeared in places the galaxy had long ignored. Small at first, then growing, then binding together like sparks feeding a flame. Humans did not ask permission. They did not wait for the old powers to guide them. They simply moved forward, as if some deep instinct told them that the end of the map was not an end at all, but a beginning. Legends began to spread. Traders spoke of humans who discovered hidden wormholes and traveled where no one dared. Soldiers told tales of human captains who stood against storms of plasma and held their ships together with little more than courage and clever hands. Even scholars began to listen, realizing that the maps of the ancients were not as perfect as they believed. The galaxy had seen many powers rise and fall, but never before had it seen a species that looked at the great emptiness and smiled. Humans treated the void not as a threat, but as a challenge. To them, every unknown system was not danger, but invitation. In quiet corners, leaders of old civilizations began to worry. They had lived so long that they thought everything worth finding had already been found. But these newcomers showed them otherwise. If humans could make the dead edges of the galaxy shine again, what else could they uncover? What secrets might they pull from the dark? And more troubling, what might they become when they did? At the edge of the galactic map, a human ship drifted near a nameless star. Its hull was scratched, its engines weary, but its crew looked forward with eyes full of fire. Before them lay the void, vast and waiting. The galaxy had stopped its maps here, but humans were not maps. They were stories, and stories rise where lines end. Sparks in the void. The first stations humans built at the edge of the map were not grand. They were small outposts patched together with steel and stubbornness. Old powers laughed at them, calling them fragile toys, but the stations grew one after another until they linked into a chain across the empty reaches. Every beam of metal, every glowing light was proof that humans refused to stop. They carried supplies across vast stretches where no trader dared to fly. They built fuel depots where others saw only silent rock. Soon, routes that once ended now continued, marked not on ancient maps but in human memory and record. Explorers became pioneers. Pioneers became settlers. Entire families began to travel beyond the edge, carrying seeds, books, and dreams. They built farms on frozen moons, carved homes into asteroids, and grew gardens under artificial suns. The void that had been empty for eons now echoed with human voices, but the void was not empty forever. Strange signals began to appear. At first they were faint, just whispers of radio static that could be dismissed as natural bursts. Then came fragments, patterns of sound, repeating codes, broken words. Humans leaned closer. Where the old powers would have turned away, they listened. One ship, the Horizon Star, followed a signal across weeks of silence. Its crew found ruins orbiting a dying star. Structures older than memory floated there, scarred but unbroken. The designs were alien, unlike any known civilization. On the walls, they found carvings of beings long gone, creatures whose shapes did not match any species alive. The discovery shook the edges of the galaxy. For centuries, the great powers had claimed there was nothing beyond the map. Now humans proved them wrong. They had touched echoes of something ancient, something forgotten even by the oldest archives. The old powers could not ignore this. They sent their own ships, their own scholars, their own fleets trying to claim what humans had found, yet they were too late. The humans had already written themselves into the story. Tension rose. On one world, a council of the elder races debated what to do. Some argued that humans should be stopped before their curiosity awakened dangers hidden in the void. Others whispered that perhaps the humans had a role the galaxy had forgotten, a role no other species could play. Meanwhile, in the human stations, life continued. Farmers grew food under the stars. Engineers patched old engines with clever hands, and children learned to run in low gravity before they could even walk on Earth-like soil. The settlers lived hard lives, but they did not complain. For them, the frontier was not punishment. It was freedom. Legends grew with them. There was the tale of a pilot who flew his broken ship through a storm of plasma, guiding a convoy to safety with nothing but willpower and a half-functioning thruster. There was the story of a medic who saved an entire colony from a plague using nothing more than herbs grown in hydroponics and a mind that refused to quit. There were whispers of explorers who claimed to have met shadows in the void, beings not seen, only felt, watching from the edges of perception. Some dismissed these as myths. Others listened carefully, because in the history of the galaxy, myths often hid truths too heavy to carry openly. The ruins were only the beginning. More signals appeared, leading humans deeper, always deeper. Some ships did not return. Their loss weighed heavy, but still, more volunteers rose to replace them. It was as if humanity itself had decided that silence was unacceptable. The void must speak, and they would make it speak. The great powers had once believed that the galaxy was complete. Every system mapped, every truth known. But now they began to see cracks in their certainty. And through those cracks walked humans, carrying torches of legend. One day at a gathering in a neutral station, a scholar of an elder race said quietly, "They are reckless. They do not know fear as we do. Perhaps that is why they walk where none of us dare." Another, older still, replied, "Perhaps it is not that they do not know fear. Perhaps it is that they refuse to bow to it. That makes them dangerous, and that makes them necessary." At the edge of the map, another human ship prepared for departure. Its crew stood ready, eyes shining, heart steady. They knew the risks. They knew the void could consume them. But they also knew this. Where others saw an end, they saw a road. The galaxy had laughed once. Now it watched in silence, because silence, humans had already proven, was never the final word. The watchers in the dark, the deeper humans went, the stranger, the void became. Signals grew stronger, not weaker. Patterns repeated, lights flickered on dead worlds, and the stars themselves seemed to pulse with hidden rhythm. To most species, this was a warning to turn back. But to humans, it was a call to go further. The Horizon Star's discovery had awakened a hunger. Ships launched from the frontier stations daily, each one packed with explorers, scientists, and dreamers. Their vessels were not the fastest or strongest in the galaxy, but they carried something rarer than advanced engines. They carried determination. Soon, explorers reported more ruins. Some were shattered, torn apart by time and cosmic storms. Others stood nearly whole, their halls still glowing faintly with alien power. Within these ruins were devices too advanced for even the oldest civilizations to explain. They spoke of builders who had walked the stars long before anyone alive. Among the ruins, humans began to find strange signs. Walls covered with symbols that seemed to shift when stared at, fragments of machines that hummed when touched, and shadows that lingered in the corner of vision. Crews whispered of being watched. At first, the great powers scoffed. They said humans were letting their imagination run wild. But then their own ships entered the void, and they too returned with stories. Entire fleets began to feel as if eyes were following them, unseen but certain. One ship, the Pathfinder Dawn, returned from a system with no recordings. All its databanks were wiped clean, as if erased by some invisible hand. The crew swore they had traveled through a world filled with towers of glass and endless bridges of light. Yet their ship carried no proof. Another crew claimed they had been contacted. Not with words, but with images burned into their minds. Images of stars falling, of galaxies crumbling, of a silence so deep it swallowed even thought. Some went mad, unable to carry the weight of what they had seen. Whispers spread through human settlements. The Watchers are real, they said. The Builders are not gone. They are waiting, still humans pressed on. Fear did not stop them, it sharpened them. Where others hid from shadows, humans lit torches. Where others bowed to silence, humans spoke louder. The old powers began to argue. Should they restrain humanity before they awakened something best left asleep? Or should they follow, hoping to steal whatever knowledge the humans uncovered? No agreement was made, but one truth became clear. Humans had changed the balance. In the void, a new legend was born. A small crew aboard the vessel Iron Path discovered a vast structure hidden within a nebula. It was a ring, larger than moons, spinning slowly in silence. Its surface was etched with symbols glowing faintly as the humans approached. The crew sent a signal. To their shock, the ring answered, not in language but in energy. Lights blazed across its surface, and for a brief moment, every human station across the frontier reported a surge of unknown power. The ring fell silent again, but the message was clear. They were not alone. The galaxy trembled. If the Watchers truly remained, then the map was more than incomplete, it was false. For centuries, civilizations had lived in the illusion of safety, believing the void was empty. Now that illusion was breaking, and humans were the hammer. Despite the danger, frontier life grew. Settlers raised new towns on rocky worlds. Children were born under alien skies, learning to write their names beside the symbols of ruins. Traders carried goods between stations, and human songs filled places once thought lifeless. But under the songs, there was unease. Even humans admitted they felt the weight of unseen eyes. Some nights, explorers swore they heard voices on their comms, soft and distant, speaking in tones they could not translate. One young settler looked up at the stars and asked his father, "Why do we go further if something is out there watching us?" The father smiled, tired but proud. Because the moment we stop walking, the story ends. And humans do not end at the edge of a map. We rise. And so, despite the growing fear, ships kept leaving. More ruins were found. More signals were received. The void, once silent, now buzzed with tension. The galaxy had always believed the map marked its limits, but the humans had proven otherwise. They had drawn new paths into the unknown, and with every step, they stirred something older than stars. The Watchers were no longer content to sleep. Fire on the horizon. The ring in the nebula was only the beginning. After its awakening, signals across the frontier grew louder, sharper. Ships recorded sudden bursts of light that formed patterns like writing across the void. Strange storms appeared, lasting only minutes but bending space in ways no science could explain. The old powers could no longer stay silent. Fleets from ancient civilizations moved to the frontier, their massive warships casting shadows over human stations. They claimed they came to protect order, but in truth they feared. Fear of what the humans had stirred and fear of being left behind. Tension rose quickly. Human settlers watched the alien fleets with suspicion, while traders whispered that a war was coming, not between humans and the old powers, but between the galaxy itself and whatever lived in the dark. On the world called Ember's Rest, the first clash came. A ruin had been uncovered deep beneath the surface, filled with machines still humming faintly. Both humans and an elder race sent teams to claim it. Arguments turned to shouting to threats, and then weapons fired. It was not a full war, but the galaxy felt the spark. Blood had been spilled at the edge of the map, yet something strange followed. In the days after the battle, both sides reported dreams, shared dreams. Entire crews spoke of walking through endless halls of light, hearing voices that were neither hostile nor kind, only vast. The Watchers, it seemed, had noticed the fighting, and they did not approve. Ships vanished in the following weeks. Not destroyed, vanished. No wreckage, no distress call, only silence. Some said the Watchers had taken them as warning. Others claimed the humans had opened a gate too early, and the void itself had swallowed the vessels. But despite the danger, humans refused to step back. Instead, they grew bolder. The frontier became a line of flame, burning brighter as more explorers joined. Settlers carved their homes deeper, traders expanded routes, and soldiers swore to guard every new world. A saying spread among them: "If the void watches, let it see us rise." The old powers struggled to understand. For ages they had lived by caution, by balance, by retreat when things grew uncertain. But humans seemed to draw strength from uncertainty. The unknown was not their enemy. It was their reason to exist. One elder leader spoke bitterly in council. "They are reckless sparks, and sparks burn." Another replied, "Yes, but sparks also start fire, and fire spreads." That fire spread again when a human fleet discovered something beyond even ruins. It was a station, intact, floating near a black star. No record of it existed in any archive. The station was massive, its walls built from a material no scan could identify. When humans approached, it opened, not with weapons, but with corridors of light guiding them inward. Inside, they found chambers filled with orbs of memory, each holding fragments of countless civilizations, some known, most lost to history. The humans touched them and saw flashes, worlds thriving, falling, vanishing into silence. It was a library of the dead, but at the heart of the station was something else, a message. Not written, not spoken, but felt. A weight pressing into the minds of all who entered. You walk too far. You carry fire where silence must remain. If you continue, the storm will wake. The storm does not forgive. Most species would have fled at such a warning. Humans did not. They carried the message back, argued over it, and still prepared their ships for the next voyage. To them, it was not a command. It was a challenge. The galaxy trembled again. Old powers whispered of sealing off the frontier, of blockading humans before they brought doom upon all. But others quietly admitted a truth they did not want to face. Without the humans, no one else would dare. Without the humans, the edge would remain empty, and the secrets would stay buried forever. And so the choice was clear. The void had spoken. The Watchers had warned. Yet humans would rise anyway. At a small station orbiting a dying sun, a captain stood before her crew. She looked out at the dark, at the endless stars, and said simply, "We are stories, and stories do not end at warnings. Stories break walls. Engines lit, ships rose, and once again humanity stepped into the silence. This time, though, the silence was waiting. Where legends rise, the silence was no longer empty. It carried weight now, pressing against every ship that entered the frontier. Humans felt it most of all, but they did not turn back. Their fleets moved deeper, past ruins, past rings, past forgotten stations. Each step carried them further into the unknown, where even stars seemed afraid to shine. Then it happened. A fleet of human explorers entered a system no map had ever marked. At its center was not a star but a wound in space, dark, vast, and alive. The void twisted there, rippling like water disturbed by unseen hands. Out of the darkness came shapes, tall, shifting forms made not of flesh but of light and shadow. The Watchers. They did not speak with voices. They pressed thoughts directly into human minds. Images of burning galaxies, of civilizations crushed, of storms that devoured suns. The message was clear. Turn back. The fire you carry will wake the storm. Stop before it is too late. The human crews trembled. The warning was not a bluff. Every image was too vivid, too heavy, and yet even in fear they stood firm. For what was the point of maps if not to be broken? What was the worth of stories if they ended at silence? One captain stepped forward, her ship battered but steady. She projected her reply in the only way humans knew, with words raw and simple. We do not stop. We do not bow. We walk into dark because that is where light belongs. If storms wait, then let them come. We will not be erased. The Watchers did not answer. Instead, the void trembled. Energy surged, stars shook, and the frontier lit with storms of impossible scale. Old powers watching from afar cried out in terror, believing the humans had doomed them all. But then something unexpected happened. The storms bent, but not to destroy. They swirled around the human ships, testing, measuring, and finally acknowledging. The Watchers, ancient and vast, saw something no other species carried. Defiance strong enough to challenge silence itself. For countless ages, the galaxy had been quiet. Civilizations rose, then fell, leaving only ruins. The Watchers had seen this cycle repeat, endless and hopeless. But humans were different. They were not content to fade. They turned endings into beginnings, ruins into homes, silence into song. And so the Watchers withdrew. Not in defeat, but in recognition. The void did not vanish, but it opened. Pathways once sealed now stretched outward, stars long hidden now revealed. The frontier was no longer the end. It was a doorway. Humans returned from that encounter changed. They carried no trophies, no weapons, no proof to wave before the galaxy, but they carried something greater, the legend of having stood before the oldest power in existence and not bowed. Word spread. Across the galaxy, beings who had once mocked or feared humanity now whispered their stories with awe. Children of distant worlds played games where they pretended to be human explorers. Walking boldly into the dark, scholars rewrote their maps, leaving no edge unmarked. Soldiers trained not just for war but for journeys beyond what was known. The old powers, once secure in their long reign, now faced a truth they could not deny. The galaxy's future no longer belonged to them alone. It belonged to a species that turned endings into beginnings, a species that rose when maps stopped. And on the frontier itself, life grew brighter. Stations expanded into cities. Settlers raised towers of glass and steel on forgotten worlds. Traders carved routes through systems that had been silent for ages. And children born under alien suns pointed at the stars and asked not where does it end, but where do we go next? The legend spread even further. Stories told of a people who faced Watchers in the dark and refused to kneel. The tale carried across the galaxy, passed in songs carved into stone, whispered on every station. It was no longer only a human legend. It became a galactic one. And so at the place where the maps had stopped, the legends of humans rose. They were not the strongest. They were not the oldest. They were not even the most advanced. But they were the species that refused to end its silence. They were stories, and stories rise forever.